So everybody's heard this term, get out of your comfort zone. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some stuff like that. Mainly, I want to get into more like intentionally putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and what kind of growth you can see from that. I'll give you some examples of how I do it and how the results that I've seen from it. And then I want to circle back to Graph and just give some ideas on how I think it could help you navigate your way through this culture. So let's start with talking about the concept of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and why would you do that? So what happens when you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and you manage to get through it, you come out the other side a little bit stronger. So even if it's a tiny thing, like one example is taking a cold shower. Like it sucks being in the cold shower, but if you can stay in there and stay calm and get out the other side of that without turning on the hot water, you've overcome something. You've overcome this discomfort and you intentionally put yourself in that discomfort. So there's a lot of growth that can happen by doing these kind of things over and over again. You might think like, what the fuck is one cold shower going to do? It's probably not going to do too much. But if you do that kind of stuff all the time, you're going to build up a lot of mental toughness. You're going to build up the I can't remember what I guess it's willpower. You're just going to build up the ability to put yourself in these positions, to overcome these things. And it's going to compound. So the more you do, the better and better you get at being able to deal with this kind of stuff. And so that's the general idea of putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations. And by doing that a lot and consciously doing that and giving yourself these little tests, it's going to help you get through uncomfortable situations that are beyond your control. So let's just talk about, we talked a little bit about that throughout this project. Cub and I had discussed this quite a bit, like these ideas of things being out of your control and how you handle them. And so that's all cool to say, but like, what can you do to practice being able to get through these things that are beyond your control? And this is one way you can do it. If you look at the society and the world and all that shit, like there's so much stuff that's made specifically to make us comfortable. We all want to be so comfortable. We want the parking spot that's right near the door, and we want to be in air conditioning, and we want to have the most comfortable seat. We don't want to stand in line. We don't want to hold on to heavy things. We want somewhere to put it down and all this kind of shit. You're constantly trying to be more comfortable, but the reality is, like, if you try to make yourself uncomfortable, it's going to make you stronger. If you try to make yourself comfortable all the time, it's going to make you softer. So I feel like this whole idea of everybody trying to be comfortable and everybody, all this shit being like safe and, it's kind of like fucking with our resilience, So you see a lot of like reactive shit, and there's so much stuff on like social media where people are so reactive and there's so much negativity flying around. I think it's a lack of mental toughness and just sort of a lack of people being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So some things that I do, like the cold shower thing, I do that. I fucking hate being in the cold shower, but you're building up this resilience and you're building up that mental toughness by putting yourself in that uncomfortable situation. There's also some cool side effects to taking cold showers or like ice baths. I've never done an ice bath. That shit sounds crazy to me, but you get energized, and I don't really remember the science behind it, but you can look it up. I do remember in the 90s, I was on tour with my band, and we were stopped somewhere. I don't remember. Somewhere in like the middle of the fucking country. And we went to this like natural body of water. I can't remember if it was like a spring or something. And it was like, I remember it was fairly warm outside, but the water was so fucking cold. Like I just jumped in without like testing it or anything. And I remember coming up and just yelling, fuck, 'cause it was so cold. And then you just sort of like hung out in there freezing, and then you get used to it and you feel better. But I remember when we all had to load back into the van and we had to go to our next destination, I remember telling everybody in the van, I was like, dude, I have so much energy. There must have been some weird shit in that water, like some kind of crazy fucking, I don't know what. But so I remember just feeling like that was the most amount of energy I ever had. And even though it was a long time ago, it was the mid-90s, I still remember exactly what that felt like. Unfortunately, the water in my house doesn't quite get as cold, so I can't really experience that as much as I'd like. But anyway, so look that up if you're interested and see if it's something that'll, I don't know, whatever. So a couple other things that I do, like, when you're walking around a store or something and you're carrying something heavy, and every time you stop, you want to put that heavy thing down. I just like make myself carry it. And so like my arm will start hurting and my hands, because you're, like at the grocery store, if you're at Home Depot with a bunch of shit in one of those buckets or something, and your fingers kind of start hurting and all this kind of stuff. So even those kind of things, they'll build on top of each other, and they're small things. So you just keep putting yourself in those situations. So like, you could take the stairs instead of the elevator and make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, even if it's really hot. Like, I mean, obviously, if you're not healthy enough to do that, then, use common sense. But there's lots of things you can do that will put yourself in these uncomfortable situations. So I have been finding that I'm gaining a lot from doing this and from actively doing this. And I'm actually trying to double down on it now, like, to just really be looking for those opportunities to put myself in uncomfortable situations and getting out the other side of them, because I know that it's going to help. Like another example, like I've always been sort of attracted to like shitty food. Like I really like eating shitty food, but I hate how it makes me feel. So I eat, my diet is plant-based. I eat real clean, real healthy, a lot of produce and all that shit. But I would be lying if I said that I didn't enjoy, some really shitty food. The vegan junk food options these days are pretty crazy. So they are tempting, but at the same time, because I've practiced this and I build up this, I'm actively building up my mental toughness. I don't think I'm ever going to be done. But it's way easier to resist those things. And a couple of examples, like another way that I test myself is I fast on Mondays. So I don't eat any food at all. It gives me all these great opportunities. Like one, when I'm at work, I feel like I'm hungry, but I get to resist that temptation of eating, which helps me build up this mental toughness and this resilience. But the better test is when I get home. My girlfriend and I always have dinner together. And so I get to have this really great test because she's going to eat in front of me. And a lot of times it's some shit that I really like, and I get to smell it. And I just get to be in the presence of that. And I fucking have gotten to the point where I like that. Like I like being tested. Like, there's some people that would get pissed at her because they're like, oh, I'm fasting and you're eating that fucking delicious food in front of me, getting pissed off because she's not supporting your thing. But I tell her the opposite. She'll say, oh, I feel bad eating in front of you. I'm like, no, get the most delicious shit you can imagine and just eat it in front of me so I can smell it and I can just resist it, Granted, I do fail. I did fail a couple weeks ago. Like she had some... I don't know what the fuck it was, like falafel or something. And I was like, man, I'm going to eat some of that. So you fail. But then there's another thing failure is also an opportunity to learn. So like, even though that failure is kind of like, what are you going to learn? Like, I didn't fast, there's not like a huge lesson there, but like any other failures, if you make the wrong decision in business or if you act a certain way in a relationship and realize that you were wrong or you made the wrong choice and things like that, that's also an opportunity to grow in a very similar way. Andy Frisella has an episode you might want to check out. I think it's called Test Days. And in that episode, he talked about this guy named James Lawrence. And this guy did 50 Ironmans in 50 states in 50 days. And one of the things that he said was like always putting yourself in these uncomfortable places to build up that mental toughness. So like, I think that's probably one of the best examples that I've ever heard of somebody. I think Andy said on his podcast that after like the fourth one or fifth one, he fucking lost all of his toenails. So he still had 45 Ironmans to go. And just look up Ironman. Like nobody's going to do this shit except for like these crazy, nobody's going to do one. I mean, people do them, but like most of us, the vast majority of us are not doing a single Ironman. And this dude did 50 of them. Not to mention, you think about all the travel that he had to do, going from one state to the next. Like, he couldn't have been getting enough sleep, but he still pushed through and he did all this stuff. And one of the reasons that he talks about why he was able to do it is for exactly the kind of shit. I mean, not exactly, but he probably puts himself in some incredibly uncomfortable things. But most of us, and I would assume that most of you listening aren't trying to accomplish something like that, but but if you are, obviously this will be a way to do it, and you'll just have to find like way more uncomfortable things to put yourself through in order to achieve that. So some of the results that I've been finding, and I've been doing this for some years, I find I've learned how much I can live without, and that's like another great thing that's helped me manage my money better and spend more, be a little more, what the fuck is it? Like decisive, I guess, in the way that I spend my money, and a lot less impulse buying. And one of the ways that I did that was when I opened the studio here, I wanted to open this place that gives back to the graph culture and provides an art gallery and then a space for people to come and have black book sessions and all that stuff. And I really wanted to get back involved in the graph culture as an older writer, being able to provide something for the culture and help it grow. And that was kind of one idea that I had. And so at the time I had a decent little house in Atwater Village. I had a pool. I had a custom studio in the backyard that I had fully built out and renovated that I can run my motion graphics business from. And so when I decided to do the studio, I was trying to be a little more practical about taking on that extra expense. I already had like a pretty expensive mortgage and all kinds of other bills. So I was a little concerned about taking on, a couple grand a month or more in, a bit more than maybe like 2,500 more a month in expenses to keep this studio open. So I decided that I was just going to rent my place to a buddy and then just move into the back of the studio. And the first place that I got, it was basically just a big rectangle. It was a 2,500 square foot rectangle with a fucking the bathroom. It's like the bathroom should be in quotes because it was basically like a toilet in the back corner, and they just built like a little wall. It was just pretty much like a porta potty built into the back of the fucking place. And then there was this makeshift sink on the outside that, had this pipe coming out, and the pipe was balanced on top of a fucking paint can. It was like an outs, the kind of like what do you call it? A spigot or whatever, the thing that's usually outside. That was what was where the water was coming into this like weird old rusty sink. And that was it. It was just a bare bones thing. There was no heat, no air conditioning, no hot water, no shower, no kitchen, no nothing. And I was like, this is where I'm going to live. I'm going to just see what I can do. Like, see if I can I live like this? Can I go shower at the YMCA and go to the laundromat? Like these things, for me, it was a huge downgrade, but like, right outside my door, there's people sleeping in the alley and, strung out on drugs. There's people that had it a lot worse, but I mean, it was a test for me to go from being incredibly comfortable to really uncomfortable for years. And I was nervous about bringing a bed in the back of that place because it wasn't zoned for live work. Like I technically wasn't supposed to be living there. So I slept on a recliner for about, 3 years. I did that for a little over 5 years, lived like that. And I ended up upgrading to a new studio after a couple of years of being, I had a 2-year lease at the first place, saw an opportunity to upgrade. And while this place that I have now, I don't live here anymore, but the place that I'm at now, or we're at now, it's much, much better. It's way nicer, but still no hot water, no shower, no kitchen. Still doesn't have any of that shit that I was accustomed to. But it was just such a great experience because the longer that I did it, the more I was like, this isn't that big of a deal. It's not, like, I don't really need all that shit. Like, if I have to go back to that, I live it normal now, but if I have to go back to that, I can easily do that. And I don't even think it'll be hard for me if I did have to do that. So obviously I built up some kind of mental toughness and built up something in myself that allowed me to be able to, to be uncomfortable and not have all these creature comforts. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this now is because, with Cub passing, a lot of us are hurting because of that. I mean, he was I wish we could have done more of these because, I mean, I've just never met anybody that was so positive. Like, I've just never been around that before. Like, it was almost, when I first started hanging out with him, I was like almost slightly uncomfortable by how positive he was because it was just so foreign to me. Like, we'd get these messages like, "Good morning, brother. It's a beautiful day," and I'm like, what the fuck? Who says that? And so, but over time I really started to appreciate it. And I started to be like, man, this is a really unique fucking dude. This guy is bringing a lot to the table. And like, every time I talked to him, he was positive. Like, I never, ever, ever talked to him when he was in a bad mood. And so his passing it's leaving a huge void. And, not only was he a co-host on this podcast, he worked at the studio here, and he was a big force here. He was part of the Cuts crew. So not only losing a friend that like I grew to, I don't want to say rely on, but like, he was kind of my go-to when I would, want to bounce ideas and business things and kind of just see if like something I was thinking about made sense. And I always felt better when I talked to him about it. So it was it's a tough thing to go through. But I honestly feel like because I've been practicing this thing and like studying things like stoicism and intentionally trying to build up mental toughness and fortitude and all these kind of little buzzwords that you hear, I think I'm doing way better with it than I would be had I not. Of course, there's no way to know that because, this is where we're at. But so I feel like if you practice this and you put yourself in these tough situations, and when I say tough, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything major. Like, if you're just consistently making things a little bit harder, start to train your brain or whatever the fuck, your willpower into accepting and embracing these less than comfortable scenarios. And then also when you're being tested, so like to talk about graffiti, let's say, especially for anybody, but it's like especially harder for new people a lot of times when you're really getting into like the real culture. If you're just like catching tags in bathrooms and doing whatever stuff, and you're not actually involved in the culture, you may not run into too much of this. But like, if you really start going into yards and like start meeting other riders and stuff, you're gonna find all these scenarios where you're tested. You're gonna find, let's say you go to the yard and you do a piece and you want to come back the next day to get flicks and you come back and there's some kids going over your shit. So you spend all this time and you don't even get to get flicks, like, there's that kind of shit. You get capped, you get fucking, somebody crosses you out, just being a dick or something, or some skater kid writes some shit on your piece. You get some kind of negative shit on social media, all these kind of things. There's all these like opportunities to be tested within this culture. And the better you handle yourself in those situations, in my opinion, the better your standing will be. Like it always seems like the people that are humble and they carry themselves well are the most talked about people, unless you go all the way to the other side when somebody's just fucking totally. I don't want to get into that because I'm thinking of some specific examples of people that are just like way out there. But let's not do that. Let's keep it on the positive side. But like you always hear about, humility is always praised, generally praised. Like an example is when Script passed away recently. If you saw a lot of the comments outside of kind of like the more traditional stuff, a lot of people were like commenting on how humble he was. And that was my experience with him too. He was incredibly humble. So I feel like if you're trying to get to that place, this is another way to do it. Because if you're testing yourself and building up that mental fortitude, mental toughness, I think that can also help keep your ego in check. But I don't know. I haven't really thought too much about that. But so I think that's all I got. I'm going to cut in some stuff from Cub. I believe it's from the mental toughness episode where he talks about some stuff like this, or just mainly just, I'll just let him talk. I'm going to cut that in. So to wrap it up, I just wanted to tell everybody I appreciate all the messages, and I appreciate you still supporting us and supporting the groundwork that Cub and I laid together, and we're trying to. So I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I'm just going to try to keep pushing the original vision forward as best I can. And if you caught the last episode, you'll get some ideas on what I'm trying to do to keep Cub connected. And that's always going to be the idea moving forward, is you'll always hear his voice. And I will also do my best to make sure that I'm putting out content that I feel that he would have embraced had I had the opportunity to run the idea by him. And also his sister gave me some notebooks. He was writing a bunch of different ideas for podcast episodes, so hopefully we can get some good stuff out of that. And I can do my best to deliver some episodes with that info. So anyway, thanks again for supporting. If you like what's going on here, we would really appreciate it. You sharing it on social media. God damn it. Fucking, I have the hardest time with this end shit. This is the shit that I say every time. I don't know. Motherfucker. Okay, here we go. If you like what we're doing, it would be very appreciated if you could give us a review or a rating on whatever platform. I believe iTunes is probably the most beneficial, but any platform that you listen to this on, if you have the opportunity to leave a review. My understanding is that, the more higher ratings and reviews and all that kind of, the more engagement, the more that this will get put in front of people. So if you feel like people could benefit from it, then that would be a good way to help us out. And then if you have any questions or episode ideas, please email that over to graffitimachine@gmail.com. And I'll do my best to answer those questions, relevant questions. All right, I'm going to get out of here, so I'll leave you with a little wisdom from Cub. Thank you all for supporting. Appreciate it.
What is it that one does when, here's a good way I heard of it recently, when one is faced or within the furnace of adversity, when somebody is up against when their whole fucking world has been pulled apart. When something happens, when they think that they ain't shit, they're not good enough, they never will be, they'll never have that, they'll never be that, they'll never resolve that. All those things, when you lose somebody, that was everything to you in your life, like when everything just feels like it's fucking, the fucking world has been pulled out from underneath you. Mental toughness is continuing on whatever path that you were on in the first place and like following through with whatever the fuck you said you were going to do, regardless of the fact that your world feels like it has been ripped to fucking part. So that's the dark and extreme version. But I think if we can understand that, we can understand all the, you know, and it ties into what we just ended our last or the one previous with, which is, okay, this was the outcome here. I didn't expect it. There's no possible way we could have predicted it. I fucking hate it. I'm not feeling what this feels like right now or what I'm up against. So how am I going to respond to it? How am I going to react to this? Where am I going to pull a silver lining from this? Because from every single part of this, I know that there's some kind of an opportunity, or I know there's some kind of a fucking lesson. And it could be so irritating to keep hearing that, but that's the truth of it all. It's all about your perspective of having that mental toughness. If your perspective is in that form, in that way that we discussed in something else we can get into later, that you see that there is an order here, or there is a reason, or there is, you know, not to throw a cliche quote or a, you know, affirmation at it, but in essence, that's what it is. If you can keep going back to whatever's been thrown in my fucking face right now is probably exactly what I need to work on. It's probably the one thing that I've been neglecting and shelving way too often, or to a degree that is gonna crush me. So mental toughness, if I were to wrap it all up into one quick, you know, whatever phrase or whatever the fuck I'm trying to say, it would be how you respond to something and having that particular perspective, no matter how fucking dark it may seem.
All right.
Good. Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.